Good evening and welcome to Hinsdale South's Financial Aid Question and Answer. My name is Michael Holland. I'm the Director of Counseling at Hinsdale South. I'm delighted to welcome you here virtually tonight. We're very excited to have a very talented panel with very deep wisdom on the topic of financial aid with us here tonight. We have 3 college reps whose name and contact information you see on the screen. We also have with us school counselor Hank Eubanks, who serves as our financial aid lead for the department, building up a body of knowledge and wisdom around this topic. And our main presenter is Mr. Frank Palmisani, who I'll introduce in more detail in just a little bit. Just so families know, Fafsa is now a graduation requirement in the state of Illinois. So every student, in order to receive a diploma, must either file the Fafsa, or if a family feels like the FAFSA is not appropriate for their situation, file a waiver saying you specifically are choosing not to file the FAFSA. Those are the 2 options, but you have to do one or the other. So for about 99% of our families, that means filing the FAFSA. So we have a FAFSA completion event on October 20th during students' PE classes. We're going to gather all students out of PE and have them at least get their FSA ID, which is the first step in completing FAFSA. And we're going to have a FAFSA completion event targeted at parents a little bit later on in November. So be checking your email for details about that. For our financial aid night this year, the way we want it to work is that you were emailed a YouTube link with an hour-long video from Mr. Palmisani on really the details and nuts and bolts of the financial aid process and the most common questions. So the vision was you would watch that ahead of time and then come here tonight for question and answer. If you haven't watched that video, that's okay. It's on demand on YouTube. As I said, we emailed it to you. I'll put it in the chat here tonight, but you can access that video whenever you'd like to get a really great resource on financial aid. When you're asking questions tonight, we ask that you submit them via chat. Again, Mr. Palmisani, a regional expert. He's written a book on the topic of financial aid. He was a 20-year counselor at Hinsdale South. Before that, a director of admissions and financial aid at a local university. And he's been featured widely in media, both on the national level, print media like Boston Herald, Chicago Tribune, but also TV, WGN, CBS, WTTW. He's a regional expert who's leaned on for trusted advice and expertise. So we're very excited to welcome Mr. Frank Palmisani to Financial Aid Question and Answer.
Try to give you a synopsis tonight of some of the key components of that particular program. And I would also like to point out at the bottom of the video, there's a Show More tab. And when you get to the Show More tab, typically you'll get all the handouts. And the handouts are great supplements to the video, and those are also a permanent resource for you as the video is itself. So if you recall from the video, we started with this idea of looking at pricing in 3 different dimensions. And we talked about the 3 different definitions of pricing. The sticker price, which is the most obvious, that's what colleges charge, list as their charges. The net price, which you get from your net price calculators as a good estimate of what you would pay, and your eventual out-of-pocket cost. And so then I talked with the idea about why it's important for every family to create a 3-column chart. So you can actually move your pricing from the highest price, sticker price, downward as you go through this process. We then get into every possible way that a sticker price can actually be reduced. And so there's a handout that shows you all of those variables and opportunities. And of course, I go over in the video. We then go through what I think is probably the central aspect of this, especially for parents of juniors or parents of freshmen and sophomores. And that's, what do you do to plan for all of this? Actually walking you through the concept of a planning phase. The idea of really utilizing this column 2, the net price calculators, assessing what you can afford, understanding that there are different categories of pricing. In other words, colleges fall into different pricing categories. And how, if you're using all of the categories as examples, you should be able to determine what schools appear to be financial reaches, what schools appear to be financial fits, and what schools indeed might be your financial backups. And so I go into a kind of a big portion of the presentation on that particular approach. And then, of course, we get into this finding column 3, because that's the execution phase. How exactly do you get to your out-of-pocket costs? And that's the detail of the system, where you get into filing the document that Mike just talked about, the Fafsa document for parents of seniors, sometime in the month of October or certainly early November. Listing colleges, we suggest that you find 10 colleges and list 10 colleges in the document. That's what the document allows, so that the colleges can do their work. And of course, their work is to accumulate this information, this number that will come out of FAFSA, which right now they call EFC, and then get information that comes from a high school transcript, like the student's GPA when the student applies, obviously. Putting all of that together, then the college issues the award, the financial aid award, that might come out as early as November, December, but oftentimes comes in January. So the benefit of a kitchen table filled with options in the months of January and February, so that families can process all of the dimensions of fit. What are the best schools academically? What are the best schools from a field standpoint? And then what are the best options for the family financially? Giving you up until May 1 when you have to make that final decision. So that's the importance of understanding the timeline and indeed the FAFSA. And in the video, we go through the elements that drive the EFC number. One of the other things I did in this year's video that's different is we talked about the changes in the system and how these changes are going to impact the current sophomore parents when they're seniors and their sons or daughters will be matriculating that following year, because at that point, all of the changes will be in place. But why it's important to know the changes now is because it's also going to impact current senior parents and current junior parents, because FAFSA is filed every year. And so when your son or daughter is a junior or maybe senior or sophomore in college, obviously those changes are going to impact you as well. So those were the really key principles, all of which we tried to cover in detail in the presentation. So if indeed there are questions, Mike, we can certainly get started with those.
Great. So as we begin to receive questions, again, feel free to submit those via chat or the Q&A feature. I'm wondering if each of our panelists could just take a minute to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Sarah Dougherty. I'm an admission counselor for Bradley University, and I help the students of the Hinsdale schools, especially Hinsdale South. And so Bradley University is located in Peoria, Illinois. It's a medium-sized university, and it's nearly 6,000 students total. And we have 185 different academic programs, and we'd love for you to check us out at bradley.edu. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie. I'm a freshman admission counselor at St. Xavier University. We're located in Chicago. If you have any questions for me today, I'm happy to answer those.
I'm Jill Holubetz. I'm a senior admissions counselor at in Davenport, Iowa. And I'm also proud to say I am a proud HSHS alum. I won't say what year, but I did graduate from Hinsdale South. So I'd love to answer any questions you have about St. Ambrose this evening or down the road as well.
And if I could just intervene, Jill, I don't know if you could turn your volume up, but it was really soft. So I'm not sure if it's a volume thing on your end. One of the things that has really been wonderful as we've done these presentations is having the colleges here, giving us an opportunity to really bounce ideas off of schools, because what I think everyone is going to find, all of the people that are here tonight listening, what you're going to find as you go through the process is that you can certainly use many of the admissions people that you're going to work with from start to finish. So there's been a growing trend among the universities where the admissions person you work with is actually the person that brings you through the process into the process of financial aid, and then actually works with you on that eventual final decision if you matriculate to their school. So see them as allies, see them as advocates in the process, because they can oftentimes be helpful throughout. You know, one of the things that I mentioned in the video, and it's so important to understand, is that when you're providing information through Fafsa, it literally is a snapshot of your financial situation. It is not a comprehensive analysis of who you are. And there are many variables that are beyond what is asked for in Fafsa that literally needs to be shared with admissions people. And oftentimes, this lends itself toward enhancements or potential enhancements of the actual award. So we'll certainly take any questions that appear, but until we get those, maybe each of the panelists can speak a little bit about the concept of appeals, when they like to have it done, why it's important, what are the variables that could potentially be reviewed in the context of the appeal, and then how you would work with your families that are approaching your university in relationship to that. So maybe Julie, if you'd be kind enough to start, and then Sarah, you can kick in, and then Jill.
Yeah, great question. For SXU, we offer two different types of appeals. So one is just a general appeal after a student has received their financial offer, which includes any merit scholarships they're receiving and FAFSA packaging with that. If a student receives their offer and is just curious about any additional aid that might be awarded, that's just a general appeal we can do, and we can submit that on the student's behalf. Another one we do is a special circumstance appeal. So if the information on the taxes that was submitted as a part of FAFSA is no longer current or relevant to the student or the family at the time, the student can work with our financial aid office and go through a special circumstance appeal. Typically, additional documentation is required. But that is all done through our financial aid office, and is another area where families can go to if they're interested in seeing if there's any additional aid that could be available.
Very, very similar here at Bradley. I just actually took a phone call from a parent this morning that had attended a program, and she was told that she needed to update the colleges right away. And I assured her, you're not late for anything. Bradley's process is very similar to St. Xavier's. We recommend that once the financial aid award has been sent to the student, then you can update us. We do have a special circumstance form for you to submit as well. But just to keep in touch with the admission counselors at your school, that is what I would suggest, early on. Get in touch with them early, and they can let you know as soon as that form is updated. Ours hasn't updated yet for the next year, so I told that parent I'll keep an eye on it and let her know when it's ready. But that is one method. We also will just accept an email if you just want to appeal, like just to talk to us about what the award looks like. That's certainly an option. And then also with the scholarships that come out, sometimes students receive higher GPAs as the year goes on, or updated academic information. So that's a whole other element we could look into as well as increasing that scholarship amount too.
Jill?
Can you hear me better? Or is it still quiet? A little bit?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to just switch my headphones out, but exactly the same as both other schools. I can expand upon that after I switch out my headphones here, though, but same at St. Ambrose as well.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Jill. We actually got our first questions came in, Frank, or anybody on the panel. So the first question is, the parent's aware that a student needs to create an FSA ID. The question is, do both parents need to create an FSA ID to electronically sign the FAFSA, or is it just one parent?
So really good question. The FAFSA document is going to be available tomorrow, is October 1st. So for parents of seniors, that's when you'll be actually seeing the FAFSA. And certainly filing in the month of October or early November is fine. A part of the filing process is signing it. So the way they want you to sign the document is what they call an FSAID number. And one parent must use that number along with the student. So there's two numbers, only one of the two parents and the student. Those are the two people that are signing the document. Now, when you think about it, that means a lot, because that's the information they're looking for, right? They're looking for information from the parent, and they're looking for information from the student, the financial information of the household. Now, think about that, because that relates to a topic that often comes up, and that is, what if someone else has a set of resources that could potentially be used as a college fund? I often get the question, what if a grandparent owns a 529 plan and that money is going to be used to pay for college? Well, the ownership is an individual that is not asked for on the document. And so that information is not to be shared on the document. So that's an important element. And it also relates to the obvious question, who files this document in a divorce household? So I'll cover that now. It might have come up in a question later, but we might as well go through it. And that is that right now the regulation is it's the family where the child lives most of the time. So as an example, if I was divorced and my daughter lived with me more than 6 months during the last 12-month cycle, and I did not remarry, the information, the income and assets I would record would be mine and my daughter's, not my daughter's mother. If I did remarry, it would be mine, my daughter's, and my new spouse, again, not my daughter's mother. Now, that is going to change. So the way they handle divorced families, the way they handle it now is going to change in 2 years. In 2 years, when the new application is developed in a family where you have two biological parents living in separate households, the family with the higher income is the family that they're going to want to file. But that is not the case today. It will be the case in the future.
All right, there's another question that is kind of related to part of what you just talked about, Frank. And that is, you mentioned assets that might be in a 529 plan. The question is, do you recommend moving money in the future college student savings account to a parent's account or another sibling's account or somewhere else before filing the FAFSA?
Sure, and that concept does come up quite a bit, because when you understand what drives the EFC number, it's a combination of income and assets. And in the video, I go through those in great detail. But very simply, there's a much higher expectation if the resources are the student resources versus the expectation if they're the parent resources. And again, those calculations are in the video. But one thing I can say is that 529 plans, no matter how they're titled, should be recorded as a parent asset and not a student asset. So then the obvious question is, does it ever make sense to do anything differently with your savings and investment prior to the time you file the document? Well, in the past, this used to be kind of a mystery, but it no longer has to be for families. See, the benefits of net price calculators is that they're planning tools. They're opportunities for you to create what if scenarios. So let's just take these three universities as an example. All three of them have excellent net price calculators on their website. And of course, that's true of many, many universities. So if you were to go to the St. Ambrose net price calculator, any of the three schools, you could put in a scenario exactly the way you're positioned now, look at the net price. And then you could, if you're considering, well, what if this amount of money that I have right now positioned, I would use to pay down the equity of my home as an example. Then obviously it wouldn't be recorded in Fafsa because Fafsa doesn't want the equity of one's home. Would that change my net price? And what we learn so often is that it doesn't. But for peace of mind, it's always good for families to use those net price calculators, create different scenarios, so to speak, so that they're sure that they're doing the right thing financially.
Okay, there is a question. I think the college panelists might have some insight into this as well. The question is, we mentioned the appeal process and we kind of went over that. The question was, other than what might seem like an obvious reason, like a death in the family or a significant loss of income or job, are there less obvious situations that an appeal might result in a higher amount of financial aid, or other examples of what might be an appeal process?
Sure. Sarah, would you take that one? And then we'll see if Jill or Julie have other thoughts.
Yeah, of course. And that's a great question. And I think it all kind of starts with working with your admission counselor from the beginning. And sometimes I've worked with families and they've come to me and, they get the financial award from Bradley and they're really happy with it, but maybe it's just still not really within their reach. And so they've had some medical bills, they've had fallen on hardships in some way. And, we talk it through and I approach it and try to submit an appeal for them. And I'm not always, successful. It's not a guarantee anything will change, but we're always there to listen and to help you and to hear what we can see what we can do for you. So I hope that helps.
Jill, any thoughts on that topic?
Yes, I think similar to Sarah. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yay. I think it depends if you're going through the what we call the special conditions process, which typically requires more documentation, or just a general appeal. And with a special condition, you're correct. Some of the more obvious would be a death in the family, a death of a parent, change in marital status, medical bills that are not covered by insurance, that you have to pay out of pocket, whether that's you pay your own premiums or you have to pay all of your medical bills completely out of pocket. Sometimes too, if there's a tremendous increase in income, that can be part of a special condition. We don't see that one quite as much, but that is on there as a special condition, change in marital status and so forth. Like Sarah said, a general appeal would just be dealt with kind of separately with a little bit less documentation for those families who say, we're close. Ambrose is our top choice, but we're just not 100% comfortable yet. Is there anything else that can be done? And that process will more be worked through directly with your admissions counselor. And again, that's why it's important to establish those relationships with us, because we are your advocate. We are your student's advocate. And the more that we know about a family situation, the more we can go to bat for you when it comes to appeals or special conditions.
Julie?
I would say exactly what the two previous ladies said. It's really probably pretty standard across the board for those special circumstance appeals. But again, just to reiterate, really get to know your counselors. If there are appeals that you want done, we can always do just a general appeal for you. But in terms of, the special circumstance ones, any, loss of income or change in status is really what you're going to want to file for.
One of the things that I think that's important, and I want to make sure that all of the families get a probably a good understanding of this, is that obviously the colleges are making comments based on what they do at their universities and what their experiences are. There are a lot of different places out there, right? And so sometimes when you get into the larger state schools, you might not get as much of the personal touch and maybe don't have that same opportunity. That's one of the reasons why in our approach, what we suggest is that students and parents understand the value of looking at institutions that are different from one another. Really, a variety of different options in different categories, because that's where you get the myriad of possibilities as it relates to finances. Now, in the end, nobody is suggesting that the decision you're going to make ends up being the least cost institution, because all of these variables have to be managed and married together. But you obviously at least want that information in front of you. So the real challenge comes when families don't have enough options, students don't present themselves with enough options, they get locked in the box with maybe only a couple of possibilities. It's late in the game. And then they feel the only possibility here is I have to borrow excessive amounts of money or put the family in real financial jeopardy. So that's what we're trying to avoid, to make sure that everybody understands that there are so many different options out there, and you have to explore those, be able to get the benefits from them.
All right, so there's another question that is regarding parents' stock investments and how those are calculated and captured in Fafsa. And the question is particularly around, like, given volatility we've seen in the fluctuating value of stocks, if perhaps there was another like March of 2020 and you filed a FAFSA and then your stock portfolio goes down by 30%, would that be something you would go in and revise? Or like how are stocks kind of handled in FAFSA is the question.
Really good question. And so when you think about savings that have to be included and ones that aren't included, you don't include the equity of your home and you don't include the value of any retirement plans. Now, retirement plans can be qualified plans at work, through work, IRAs, Roth IRAs, again, plans through work. But they can also be non-qualified variable annuities and or cash value of life insurance. Those are the variables that aren't included. But then when you get to the includable assets, it's everything else. So obviously, it would include a stock portfolio if a family had one, or some investment assets that are not a part of those retirement plans. So very good question, because obviously that value changes every day. So how do you assess the correct value to place in the FAFSA? And this is where FAFSA kind of goes in two different directions. When you're looking at income, it's the income from a tax return that you've already completed, right? So if you're the parent of a senior, you have your 2020 tax return, you know the answers to the questions they ask, the adjusted gross income. That's listed on the return. But when it gets to the savings and investments, you record the value of those savings and investments the day that you file the document. So now, question comes about, all right, what if I file the document in October and by March of the following year, I'm giving a possible scenario. What is that? That's a 5-6 month difference. We have a significant drop in asset value. That becomes an appealable item because something has changed since you filed the document. So the concept of change, income changes. So they look at income from a tax return. Well, what if future income is not as bright as past income? That becomes appealable. If assets are different, that's an appealable item. So those are really good questions.
All right, we have a scenario question, and that is for a divorced parent who is not remarried and is receiving child support for 3 children, but will no longer receive child support for the senior once they are in college.
Yes.
The question is, do you list the child support you receive right now or the child support you would receive when that child is actually enrolled in the school in the fall?
Right. Very good question. So the question of alimony versus child support, let me clarify the difference. So alimony is a taxable item, and so it'll show up as adjusted gross income. Child support however, is not. So it's in the untaxed income category. However, they're going to want you on the current FAFSA, the one that exists today, to include that child support received. But you bring up a very good point. So what is that reference? It references change of income, right? Because you might have gotten a child support that raises your income in the year that they want you to record it. But as this individual is suggesting, that child support falls off at age 18 or gets reduced at age 18, which obviously impacts future income. So then it becomes an appealable item. And again, I might bring this to the panelists. What have been your experiences with that as it relates to appeal? Have you had many experiences with the drop off of something like child support income And in your experiences, is that something that should be brought to the colleges? Jill, can we start with you on this one?
Yes, I've had that come up a number of times with families. And it is a generally appealable situation. In that particular case, if that's the reason that they are appealing due to that particular loss of income, we'll have them submit our untaxed income form and have our financial aid office review that to determine if that loss of income from child support is significant enough to perhaps either change their EFC or affect their EFC, if everything will remain about the same. And then in that case, we can determine if anything additional is available because of the loss of that income.
Perfect. Thanks. Julie, Sarah, anything different on your end, or is that about the same? Okay, thumbs up. We've got that covered. Good.
Frank, I've got a question that I'm seeing here. If a grandparent has money to fund tuition, that is not identified in the FAFSA, correct?
Yes, and any assets that are outside of ownership of the parents or ownership of the student is not to be recorded in the document. And I can guarantee you this, colleges don't care where the money comes from to pay the bill. So if there is a grandparent willing to pay for college, wonderful. However that happens, nobody has a problem with that. So unless it's been gifted already, and then it becomes where the student is the owner or the parent is the owner, then it gets recorded. But if the grandparent has resources and they plan to use it to pay for college, it does not have to be recorded on the document.
I have another one. I am on disability and do not have any savings. What are my options for my daughter? I'm not receiving child support. My tax return for 2020 was under $5,000 because I was waiting for my disability to get approved.
Sure. So in that case, this is a very important component here. In that case, and this is something that's going to change, and we should talk a little bit about that. That more than likely, as a family, you are what we call a zero EFC. In other words, there is not enough income or assets to produce any financial support to pay for college. So what happens with that zero EFC is you become maximum Pell eligible, and the maximum Pell grant is a little over $6,000 these days. And then if in the state of Illinois, you were happen to go to a school in the state of Illinois, you'd be maximum MAP grant eligible. So you've got two need-based grant programs. Now, the filling in of the remainder of the cost is still going to be up to the individual colleges. So some particular colleges might be able to fill in the remainder of that with their own resources, maybe through merit scholarship or need-based aid. Usually it would also include student loan and maybe campus employment. But you can't make the assumption that that's automatically going to happen. So I would just encourage families that are in that zero EFC situation to make sure you get through all of your options, that you have enough options out there, and you explore what does happen at the community college, what does happen at a school where the student lives at home, what does happen at a state-supported institution and or any of the privates. Because you obviously are not in a financial position to have resources of your own to pay for college. What do you do if indeed there are still going to be charges? Sometimes there's a false assumption that because a family has a zero EFC or a low EFC, that there aren't college charges. And you got to be careful there, because there very well may be. That's why it's important to go through all those options. But that family certainly would have what we would call a zero EFC. Now, I will point out what they're going to do with Pell Grant eligibility in the future is a little different. So in 2 years, rather than actually knowing or finding out if you're going to be Pell eligible and how much you're eligible based on filing FAFSA and getting a number, they are going to change that to a printable and publicly displayed income table. So people will see a table of incomes and family levels. So if I have a family of 4 and my income is X, I'm going to get a Pell Grant of X. So this is now going to be kind of a public document, but that's not coming for another couple of years.
Frank, just to follow up on the timing of filing the FAFSA as it relates to, you mentioned the Pell Grant, which is a little over $6,000 for a need-based grant, but Illinois has their own grant called the MAP grant. And we get questions a lot about it kind of running out of funds, and the timing of the FAFSA oftentimes matters.
Yes, great question. So this is not a first come, first served system. This is a system of eligibility, right? So I think each of the colleges, and I will ask them to speak to, at what point do they turn the spigot off of awards? You know, in other words, is there a time where you have to get everything in or you can't get any resources? So I'll ask each of the colleges to comment on that. But let me speak specifically about the program that Mr. Eubanks is speaking about, and that's MAP. So this is our state grant program. So 2 variables are in play here. The student has to go to a school in the state of Illinois, and usually this number, this EFC number, needs to come in at around 9,000, 10,000 or lower. And if it's in that category, there could very well be MAP eligibility and therefore a financial award from the state that gets added to this package. Now, there have been circumstances where that money, unlike Pell, which is always available if you're eligible, unlike Pell, MAP money could end. In other words, the state runs out, and if you file too late, even though you're eligible for it, you don't get it, or it's reduced. Usually that happens after January. So there's no logic to saying I've got to get my FAFSA in on October 1, but there isn't also a lot of logic in the saying I'm just going to delay and procrastinate and not file my FAFSA until after January. It would make sense to file the FAFSA in October or certainly November, not procrastinate too long, because you wouldn't want to be in a situation where any grouping of fundings could potentially be cut off from a timing standpoint. But let me segue. We'll go to Julie and then Sarah and then Jill. Could you just share with the group of people here, what is your timing on the actual presentation of awards? In other words, if I were to apply to St. Xavier in January and I'm eligible for a certain amount of merit money in October, would I still be eligible for that same amount of money in January? Julie, could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So for us, we offer a merit scholarship at the time of admission. If the student is admissible, they will get some type of merit scholarship offered directly from SXU. And SXU specifically is a rolling admission, so we'll accept students really at any point in the year. We always encourage the sooner the better though, but at any point the student will still be eligible for the same type of merit scholarships. And then in terms of FAFSA, we always encourage, the priority time frame of like 3 or 4 months after it's open for families to submit that. But in terms of the merit scholarships, SXU specifically will offer that at any time.
Jill, your awards, you'll award all the way through the time of enrollment. Is that true?
That is correct, because we're on rolling admissions as well. So whenever a student submits their application for admission, if they are admissible at any point throughout the admission cycle or throughout their senior year, we will consider them equally for all merit aid, all need-based financial aid, and any other awards that they would be eligible for.
And Sarah, I think most of that is true at Bradley, but don't you also have some individual scholarships that have deadlines, Sarah?
Yes, exactly. That's the same as the other two schools. And then we do have some special application scholarships that have a December 1st deadline. So that they wouldn't be related to FAFSA, but they would be related to applications for admission.
So one thing I would like to share with the group again is that there are some institutions that do have November 1 cutoff dates for scholarships. So even though you've heard from 3 institutions today that talk about the fact that they're going to award throughout the process, be conscious of some of those places that have November 1 deadlines. And so it is a good idea if your sons or daughters could think about some college possibilities, develop these, go through the process of applying and getting that in. Remember, commitments don't happen until May 1st of senior year, but you obviously want to get your applications out so that you open yourself up to as many possibilities as you can. Anything else in the area of questions, Mike or Hank?
I have another, let me see. Could a parent student loan be a reason for an appeal?
So I'm not sure if the question is, can a parent student loan be a reason for an appeal, meaning the parent has a student loan?
That's how I took the question, yeah.
That's how you're, yeah. Here's my judgment on that. As I said earlier, FAFSA is a snapshot of one's financial position. If I am burdened as a family by information, by situations and circumstances that are beyond the scope of what I reveal on FAFSA, now that could be one, right? I've got this outstanding debt, and it could come from a number of situations, but in this case, it sounds like it comes from the parents still having a student loan obligation. I would certainly share that with the college admissions people and or financial aid people I'm working with. Absolutely.
And then I have one more question I'm seeing here. Is there a way families can contact you if they would have a question for you?
Are they asking contact me directly? Certainly.
Yes.
If they would like to contact the college reps, I know Michael has them listed here, which is wonderful. And I know our college representatives are real happy to try to help families. For me, my email is also listed there. It's a very simple, palmasani@gmail.com. So the best idea would be just to email me with a question, and I would hope to be able to answer it or speak with a family if they need somebody to talk to.
And I also want to make sure I put it out there for our families at South. You're more than welcome to contact me as well. I have been a Frank Palmasani disciple for a long time, so I'm dangerous enough to answer many questions. So you're welcome to reach out to me as well in the process, just so you know.
I'm not sure I like the idea that you're a disciple, but that's interesting you use that word.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the right word, but he has definitely taught me a lot over the years, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, I would say, Mr. Palmasani, as he said, his email's up there. Our college reps have been generous enough as to share their email. Mr. Eubanks is a point of contact. Your child's school counselor is always a good place to start the conversation, because even if they don't have the answer, they'll be able to get you in touch with somebody who does, whether it's Mr. Eubanks, Mr. Palmasani, a college rep. There's an organization called ISAC that provides a lot of support to families around financial aid. So we'll be able to connect you with resources, even if we don't have the specific answer. So it looks like we've made it through all the questions. So I just want to give a really sincere thank you to the panelists and Mr. Palmasani, all the college reps, Mr. Eubanks, for taking some time and spending it with us tonight to answer some questions. It's very appropriately timed. As Mr. Palmasani mentioned, the FAFSA opens tomorrow. So you get it in, whenever you are able, and there's no exact deadline, but it opens tomorrow based on last year's tax return. So it's kind of open season and ready to go from there. On October 20th, as I mentioned, we're going to get every single senior out of PE and make sure they have an FSA ID, and try to get them with information they need to get the process rolling. But this is a primarily parent-driven process with the FAFSA. So whatever way we can support you, we'd like to do that as well.
And Mike, if I could just mention too,
Yeah.
if it's okay, the video that you hopefully watched, if you didn't, please do. It's really designed for a public consumption. So it's an informational video for anyone. So, certainly feel free to share it on social media or with friends or people you know. It's important that as many people out there that are going through this get as much valuable information as they can. This is an important financial time for you each as a family and certainly for your kids' future. So hopefully the information in the video is helpful, and feel free to share it.
Yeah, that is a good reminder. So Guardian 1 and Guardian 2 all got the link to the YouTube video emailed to them. It's been in Hornet Happenings. I put it in the chat earlier, so we can get that link to you if you don't have it. It's got a ton of great information. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Reach out as you have questions, and thank you so much to the panelists.
Great. Thanks.
All right.